almost 24 hours, and we are ready to finish. We have 6 bills left. The first bill we want to take up, I know, but people will be coming. When the rest of the members get here, we'll go to motions and resolutions, which we could actually go to now while we're waiting for members to come on the floor. Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Request unanimous consent to move to the inactive file AB 30 and SB 30 related to the HUTA, H-U-T-A fund.
Without objection?
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to take up the following items without reference to file related to the budget for concurrence on Senate Amendments AB 15, AB 14, AB 26, AB 12, and AB 23.
Without objection. Oh, Mr. Tirico, sorry, motions and resolutions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One further motion. Hereby request unanimous consent to move AB 24 and SB 24 related to the HUTA fund and repayment to the inactive file.
Without objection. As soon as the rest of the members return to the floor, we can begin hearing the bills. Okay, members, we'll now move to concurrence on AB 15, Proposition 1A repayment. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 15 by Assemblymember Gaines, an act relating to local government finance, making an appropriation therefore and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Gaines? It's a Gaines bill?
Ms. Evans, you are welcome to open on that bill.
Okay. Madam Speaker and members, this bill implements the suspension of Proposition 1A and provides for securitization and repayment. The suspension diverts 8% of the property tax revenue received by each local government in 2008-09, totaling $1.9 billion. The diversion will be provided to schools to offset state general fund costs or to reimburse state general fund costs for Medi-Cal and other programs that are provided in each county. The bill includes a securitization mechanism that is intended to eliminate any impact on local government. It provides for a joint powers agency that will sell bonds backed by the state's repayment guarantee and use the proceeds to replace the property taxes that are diverted. The state, not local governments, will pay all of the securitization costs. To ensure that securitization is successful, this bill gives Prop 1A repayment the state's highest priority after only education and general obligation debt service. And it authorizes the state to pay up to 8% interest and up to $350 million in insurance and credit enhancement costs. Local governments that choose not to participate in the securitization will be repaid by June 30th, 2013, as required by the Constitution. The bill also has a hardship provision that allows the Director of Finance to reallocate up to 10% of the total suspension amount per county to reduce or eliminate impacts that would otherwise force counties into bankruptcy or impose other extreme hardships. But we believe that securitization would make these reallocations unnecessary, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Could you turn this? All those vote who desire to vote. I can't see what. Could you switch me? All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. We're having some technical problems, but we're going to keep the roll open. What's happening?
I only have 16. I only have.
What is it? What's the number?
16 on
No, no.
Oh, I have 55 each.
Oh. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes? 57. Noes 12. Measure passes. On the urgency and on the bill. Sorry, members, we're just having some technical difficulties up here. We'll move on in a minute. Members, we are back in business. We are ready to go to AB 14. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 14 by the Committee on Budget and Act relating to local government finance and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
You may open, Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the bill we just passed implemented the suspension of Proposition 1A and securitized the funds under Proposition 1A to keep local government whole. SB 14 actually accomplishes the suspension. The Constitution requires the suspension to be in its own separate bill, and that's what this bill is. All of the other provisions are in the bill that we just passed. I would ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no discussion, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 All those vote who desire to vote.
I'm 54, I'm good. I don't feel 52 or not.
All those vote who desire to vote. How many ways I can say that? All those vote who desire to vote. 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 We have one more person who desires to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Yeah, actually. All those vote who desire to vote. It's now 1:54, so all those vote who will desire to vote. Everyone who desires to vote, please vote. All those vote who desire to vote, even the ones who don't desire to vote, should vote. Someone pulled. All those vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves a call. We will be back. Members, moving on to AB 26, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 26 by the Committee on Budget and Act relating to community redevelopment.
So we need to. Ms. Evans, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill accomplishes the redevelopment property tax transfer. It requires redevelopment agencies to transfer to schools $1.7 billion in 2009-10 and $350 million in 2010-11. The transferred funds will go to schools that serve students within the redevelopment project areas, and the transfers will free up base property tax allocations to schools. The freed up funds will then be placed in a supplemental revenue augmentation fund in each county, and along with Prop 1A, suspension funds will be used to offset state general fund education costs or to reimburse state general fund costs for Medi-Cal and other programs provided in each county. In return, redevelopment projects will receive a one-year extension of their time limits. They may suspend their 2009-10 contribution to their low and moderate income housing fund or borrow from the fund in order to help finance their transfers. Any suspended contributions will have to be repaid within 5 years. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no debate, clerk will open the roll. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes. Measure passes. 23. Noes 23, measure passes. Members, we're moving next to SB 12. We will lift a call. Clerk will post. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 54 votes, members. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 All those vote who desire to vote.
Here's the problem. All those vote who desire to vote.
Close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 24. Measure passes. Mr. Tirico.
Madam Speaker, hereby request unanimous consent to take up without reference to file AB 12 immediately.
Oh, without objection. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 12 by Assembly Member Evans, an act relating to state government, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring an urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Tirico.
Madam Speaker, I hereby request unanimous consent to substitute the roll from SB 12, which we just finalized, for the vote on AB 12, which is before us now.
Without objection. Ayes 54. Noes 12 on the urgency. Ayes 54. Noes 12 on the measure. Senate amendments are concurred. Members, we're now moving to AB 3. We are going to lift the call on AB 3. Clerk will post. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Tirico moves a call. Members, we're just about ready to lift a call
Oh, there she is. She's over there. She's doing the computer.
on AB 14. Members, we are lifting a call on AB 14. Clerk will post. All those vote who desire to vote. All those vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 25. Measure passes. On the urgency, ayes 54, noes 25. On the bill, Senate amendments are concurred with. Members, we can also lift a call on AB 3. Clerk will post. All those vote who desire to vote. 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 Clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. Ayes 55, noes 19. On the urgency, ayes 55, noes 19. On the measure, Senate amendments are concurred with. Thank you. Mr. Tirico.
Madam Speaker, hereby request that all vote changes and add-ons be withheld.
Without objection. Oh. In the absence of objection. Members, we're now moving to our final bill. AB 23. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 23 by Assemblymember DeVore, an act relating to oil and gas leases.
Mr. DeVore, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Members, I know that many of us have now been up for some 30 hours in a row, and I think it's very important in today's economic climate that we listen to the issue of this next measure, AB 23, the Trankian Ridge project. Members, of the items that we've looked at tonight that bring in revenue to the state of California, this is the sole item that you've had a chance to vote on whose revenues are actually ongoing and continuing for the next 14 years. Members, passage of this measure tonight would bring immediately $100 million to the Treasury and between $1.8 billion and $4 billion to the state of California in the next 14 years. In addition, local agencies would receive hundreds of millions of dollars. About 450 jobs would be created along the Central Coast. Members, earlier tonight we heard about the need to preserve jobs in California, and when we talked about the potential of the closing of the NUMMI automotive plant. Members, this measure would create jobs in California. Now, what we're talking about here is a very unusual and one-time situation where you have an offshore oil rig in federal waters where the state oil, the oil owned by the people of the state of California, has been gradually draining into the federal lease, meaning that we don't get a penny of that money. Members, if the company that owns the platform is allowed to use slant drilling from that platform into state waters, we can tap that oil from a federal platform. And in exchange, members, not only are we going to get the revenue and the jobs, but we have a unique opportunity put together, members, by the local Democratic Congresswoman, by local environmental groups that support this concept, the Environmental Defense Center, Get Oil Out. Of course, we also have other interest groups in California, like the California Professional Firefighters and Peace Officers Research Association of California, that support this measure. Because, members, the unusual thing about this measure is that as the company extracts the oil, they're going to put some money away into a trust fund that in 14 years will go toward the cost of dismantling 4 offshore rigs, as well as the onshore equipment that is needed to offload that oil from the rigs to the California coast. So when all is said and done, not only will the Treasury of the state of California have more money, not only will jobs have been created, but members, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, 4 rigs will have been disassembled, taken apart, and the equipment on shore will have been taken down as well. Now, this will be overseen by the Attorney General. It'll be overseen by the Attorney General. And some people may have concern that because the rigs are in federal waters, we don't have jurisdiction. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you take down the equipment on shore that can receive the oil, there will be no place for those offshore rigs to deposit that oil. So we can control this. Members, this is good for our budget. This is good for the economy. This is good for the environment. I think rarely will you find an agreement like this that has brought in people from all across the spectrum of the state of California. I would respectfully urge your aye vote on this measure.
Seeing no, Mr. Nava?
Question of the author.
Mr. DeVore, you have a question without objection?
Yeah, if you would take a look at the bill, section 6246, sub B, sub 5. It purports to require termination of onshore operations and removal of shore facilities at the end of the lease. Are you aware of any provision in this agreement that would prohibit the sale to a successor, thereby allowing the successor to avoid the requirement of removal?
I appreciate the question. under general contract law, of course, that requirement would novate over to any individual that assumed ownership of those facilities. Therefore, that contract would and must demand the taking down of those facilities. You can't get out of the contract or the requirement simply by changing ownership.
Right, on my own time. If I may speak to this bill. Madam Speaker and members, on January 28th of 1969, there was an oil spill from Platform A in the Santa Barbara Channel. At that time, it was the largest spill in American history. This tragedy comes to mind and is in the news today because of this bill. One media account of the 69 spill said 3 million gallons of oil came out of the seabed over the next 11 days and spread in a slick from Pismo to Oxnard, so thick in places it stopped the waves from making noise. It wasn't just a crime against nature, it was a traumatic event on a national scale. Nothing could stop the oil. Day after day, it kept coming. This bill today proposes to authorize an oil drilling project off the Santa Barbara coast in the state's seabed. This would be the first new lease in California's protected waters in 40 years. This would be historic, unprecedented, and reverse decades of environmental policy. This is no small matter. The PXP proposal includes 30 new wells, where we now have but one. 30 new wells, pouring crude into the now existing single pipe that leads to the shore. Environmental documents prepared by the County of Santa Barbara describe more and bigger spills if the new wells are approved. Let's be clear about why this bill is before us. This morning, Dow Jones Newswire reported the following. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger has championed the project. California's budget difficulties would be a boon for Plains exploration. In addition to the company's potential opportunity to expand oil drilling in California, where officials have expressed near unanimous opposition to expanded drilling on the Outer Continental Shelf, Schwarzenegger scuttled a proposal by Democrats to increase fees on oil production in the state. This bill is all about manipulating the budget crisis to create a windfall for one oil company. No competition, no best responsible bidder, nothing except the reward for having a powerful and influential friend. I hear people talk on this floor all the time about how we don't want to pick winners and losers, but that's all this bill does. It picks a winner. And it doesn't just pick a winner. It hands them a crown. The crown is the coast of California. This project was rightly rejected by the State Lands Commission in January for three primary reasons. The end dates and land conveyance are unenforceable. The mitigation is questionable, and the project sets a dangerous precedent. The State Lands Commission report stated the following. The goals of the agreement could not be reliably enforced. The Commission cannot reliably require PXP to stop and close production on federal leases. The State Lands Commission said no to this project because PXP is making promises it cannot keep. The Los Angeles Times in their editorial stated, the problem with these promises is that they were written in the sand at low tide. We can write all the state laws we want, and this would do nothing to change the reality that the federal government, the United States Mineral Management Service, has the power and the obligation to find another operator for Platform Irene at the end of this lease. The Mineral Management Service has said they can conduct a top sale to extract any resource that remains, even if PXP were to abandon the lease.
10 seconds, Mr. Nava.
I'm sorry?
10 seconds.
This bill will not close down Platform Irene or any other platform. The governor would hijack the legitimate authority of the State Lands Commission and tell the public that the oil drilling plan says that when times are tough, we ignore solid public policy, set aside our values, and stick a price tag on the coast and put our environment at risk. I say vote no.
Mr. Chesbrough.
Yes, members, the hour is long and late, so I will be very brief. I represent the 1st Assembly District, which encompasses fully 1/3 of the California coastline from Sonoma County to the Oregon border. You may ask why do I have a concern with this? Well, for 35 years, many of us up and down the coast have worked together from the Oregon border to Mexico to keep the areas that have not been leased and drilled free of leasing and drilling, and to contain the drilling in the Santa Barbara Channel in federal waters. But one of the ways that we've been successful is that we haven't been hypocritical. We have protected state waters, and we've not had a new lease in state waters in 40 years. Our efforts to continue that battle, to protect our offshore waters, to protect our coastline, to protect our fisheries, to protect tourism, depend on a consistent effort by the state to protect our coastal waters. And if we allow this if we allow this drilling to take place in the Santa Barbara Channel and state waters, we will be destroying our credibility in fighting federal offshore drilling off of California. So I very strongly, on a statewide basis, if you care about the California coastline, I urge you to vote no on this bill.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand in opposition to the T-Ridge proposal, but I want to start first by acknowledging the work of all of my colleagues in these last 30 hours, Republican and Democrat, for doing the hard work that we are elected to do. We are navigating through very tough waters, and we will continue to navigate through tough waters. But I just want to applaud the spirit of cooperation with some bumps that's gotten us here. Having said that, I do have to stand in opposition to this T-Ridge proposal. I'd remind colleagues that we had an option to put a tax on oil that is already being pulled from the soil of California, the only state in this union extracting oil from oil rigs on land that does not have a tax or a fee go to the people of that state. We know that fee is extracted with the oil in Texas. We know that fee is extracted with the oil from Alaska. And our proposal would have generated not $100 million, but $900 million in the first year, $1.2 billion in the second year from existing oil drilling in this state to support the children who need education, to support the children who need health care, to support our public safety officers in their line of dangerous duty. Instead, we traded off that option for a $100 million option that requires new drilling. In my view, that is a poor choice. In my view, that is a choice that does not invest in the future of our state, but rather goes backwards to reliance on fossil fuel instead of the development of alternative energy and building a green future and green jobs and education and health care for the future of the state of California. This is a bad project. It's bad now. It'll be bad in the future. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, question to the author.
Without objection.
If, even if this bill passed and is signed by the governor, does this project still have to get Coastal Commission approval?
Mr. Calderon, my understanding was that it was the State Lands Commission that had original jurisdiction, and what this bill does is it makes a one-time carve-out with a very specific window and exemption that would allow a process that would only have an alternative board have jurisdiction over this specific project. And after this was approved, that would be the end of that ability.
But there's Coastal Commission jurisdiction.
Mr. Calderon, it's not. It's my understanding that it was the State Lands Commission that had the jurisdiction for this project.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've spoken a lot today, so I'll be very brief. Members, I want to just recognize that just a few days ago, the state of California marked the 40th anniversary of the Santa Barbara oil spill. That was a tremendously traumatic event, and those of you that were living here in the state of California like I was during that time have very, very bad memories of how horrible and how horrendous that was, not just for the Santa Barbara community, but for the entire state. As I said, it was very traumatic. Wave upon wave upon wave of oil was washed onto the shore, onto the beach in Santa Barbara. And wildlife, I remember volunteers frantically running out into the waves to try to rescue birds and other wildlife that were literally drenched in oil and could not breathe, and they suffocated because of the oil on their skin. And the just horrendous impacts of the oil in the water. And it took years for Santa Barbara to recover. It actually took years for the state of California to recover from that event, I believe, and not only California, but also the local economy, because we all know that tourists flock to California's beaches. But from that event was born a very strong grassroots movement in the state of California to save our beautiful wild coastline. And soon after that, the voters passed the Coastal Act, which established a coastal protection zone, and it also established the Coastal Commission, which is charged with protecting the coast. And a lot of other events along the coast have happened since then and subsequent to that time, and as a result of this environmental movement that was born on that day. But almost 40 years to the day, members, we are now considering reopening the state of California coastline for the first time since that event to offshore drilling. That is not something I can support. That is not something I believe most Californians would support, and I ask for a no vote.
Mr. Jones.
Question to the author, Madam Speaker.
Without objection.
Section 6246B7 and C of the bill require that any side agreements must be made public. It's my understanding this was an issue with the Lands Commission, as the lessee had a confidential agreement that it refused to share with the Lands Commission. The question for the author is, does the bill apply to any side agreements in place on January 29th when the lease was rejected by the Lands Commission?
That's a great question. My understanding is that all the terms of condition relating to this lease, including the application, anything that's revised, have to be made public.
On my own time? I appreciate the answer, but in looking at the language of this bill, I'm not so sure. I don't think that this language precludes secret side agreements, nor does it make sure that the board has the capacity it needs to ensure that there aren't secret side agreements. And that troubles me. It troubles me because I think it's absolutely essential, were we to do this, and I don't think we should, that it be entirely transparent. I remember those images that were sent around the world about what would happen to California's coast as a result of the oil spill that my colleague talked about and others as well. I think we need to take every step to make sure we don't let that sort of disaster happen here again. And the money that's being dangled before us here is not worth the risk. I ask for a no vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I originally was not going to plan to get into this debate, but I do want to keep the members' perspective. We just went through a long time, very painful cuts, because we don't have the income coming to the state of California. And we're going to have to start thinking outside the box. Our residents have told us they don't want any taxes, we can't afford them, and we still want to put out the services that the state wants to do. We need to look at alternative ways to bring income into the state of California. I have taken tours of these facilities, and they are much safer, these drilling operations, than shipping oil on tankers coming into our coast and offloading. It's a lesser of two evils. Our public demands they have gas and drive their cars, and although we're doing as many conservation techniques as we can, we still need the oil. If it doesn't come out of our own ground, our own seawaters, it's going to come from a foreign country via ship. We have to look at this in perspective. We need to have this oil reserve for our security. We need to have it for the income and revenue for the state of California. and there's not too many places to go. We need to start thinking outside the box. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. I wish we had some petroleum in our county or in the Central Valley that I represent for the revenue potential. I know that in Kern County to the south, they have a number of wells, and it has been helpful to the local economy. And I, like everyone else, enjoy the amenities along the coast. I enjoy driving. I enjoy the beaches. And while I don't surf, I would note that those that do surf on boards that are made with petroleum byproducts, and many of them are wearing wetsuits, which are also made out of petroleum byproducts. I think fair is fair. This budget is causing pain throughout the state. It's causing everybody to sacrifice. And I don't know where else we would get $100 million to restore some of the cuts, or where else we might make up the difference. So for that reason, I would urge an aye vote.
Ms. Brownlee.
Rise in opposition of AB 23, and I'll be very brief, and just want to remind this body what President Nixon said on the occasion of the 1969 oil spill. He said the Santa Barbara incident has touched the conscience of the American people, and I'm rise tonight, this morning, today, whatever time it is, for this body to express its conscience and vote no on this measure.
Mr. Gaines.
Great. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and I just like the idea of having local oil, that we don't have to worry about importing oil from very challenging terrorist-ridden areas of the world, and we don't have to worry about shipping it and the potential of shipwrecks and all the CO2 emission coming out of ships as they're traveling to America. I also thought it was very interesting if you take a look at the natural seepage that occurs off the Santa Barbara coast. It's quite a bit, and the statistics will tell you that over the course of a 3-year period, the amount of seepage that comes naturally out of the ocean floor equals the Valdez accident that we had up in Alaska. So I think we need to be fair-minded in terms of realizing that there's natural seepage that occurs anyway, and additional drilling would actually reduce pressure and reduce that natural seepage. And as far as the tax issue is concerned, the states that you're comparing are states that don't have personal income tax. So if you want to modify the tax system here in the state of California, I'd be willing to look at, taxing additional taxes on oil if we could eliminate the corporate tax or personal income tax. So I'm in support. Thank you.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a long road in the past 36 hours, and I'm going to make my comments brief, but I wanted to first identify that I am a surfer. I have been a surfer for over 45 years, and I love the coast. I don't think anyone would put the coast in any jeopardy in this room, on either side of the aisle, would want to do that. But I want to put a perspective on another point that was brought up, and that's that we have local oil. We've been drilling oil in the state of California since 1876. It's an asset. We need to use it. And the tax system that was identified, since California is the third largest producer of oil in the nation, that was earlier addressed by my colleague from Northern California, identifying that there is no severance tax. The two states that he mentioned that produce more oil than us do not have any income tax, those being Alaska has no income tax, and Texas has no income tax. And yet we have the second highest income tax in the nation. And the state of Alaska, the number 2 producer of oil, has no sales tax. Think of that for a minute. No income tax, no sales tax, has one tax, oil severance tax. So that's a little balancing that you need to do in your minds as to where you want to place your taxes. In my mind, we don't need any more taxes. We need to reduce the taxes we have. And as someone who is a second-generation Californian and fortunate enough to hopefully soon in the next few minutes be going home to my wife, a fifth-generation Californian who also loves to surf and loves the ocean, I will be supporting this bill and urge an aye vote.
Dr. Fuller.
Well, I don't know about you, but I reluctantly rise today because, you know what, I'm just really tired, and I just made one of the hardest votes I've made in a long, long time. And I really appreciate all of you because we've had like one ups and downs after another for the last few days. It's been a horrible mental roller coaster, and somehow or another we all got through this, and we're still moving forward, and it was horrible for everybody in here. But I have to say one last thing, and the first thing is you all know that I have a lot of oil in my area. And I happen to love oil wells. I am most envious of Beverly Hills Oil Well on their school campus, and I want one from my next school campus. Having said that, even though I don't need any more competition, the national security that having our own oil and our own energy brings is important. The portfolio that we've all been working hard to make a well-rounded, clean, good, long-standing portfolio needs this, and other countries and other states make it work. So why can't we try as hard to make the one revenue that we Republicans figured out how to get to you? Why can't we work as hard to make it work together? Because it can work. And maybe we won't have to work so hard to cut. Thank you all for just hanging in here for a million hours. But I really urge you to be open-minded to this and try if you can, to help us make it work, because we're trying to put something up there. Thank you.
Mr. Valines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to be brief only because we have done a lot. I just would bring up a couple of things that haven't been brought up. First, this is about jobs. It's a big deal in California. If we get one extra job out of it, it'd be great. And I know we want green jobs, but I'm hoping that we're open to all jobs. But second, my understanding was, and I've been a part of this going back about 6 months ago, when this was done in Santa Barbara, this deal came together as a grassroots effort in Santa Barbara County. It had tremendous environmental support in addition to elected support. Now, I'm sure there's more pressures from the state level, but my goodness, I think the locals came together of all parties, more than Republican, Democrat, probably Green, and who knows what else is in Santa Barbara County, and said, let's do this, because I was told that the seepage problem is real, that this is going to do things to help the environment, and they were working closely with the entity that wanted to do this project. I think that's a win-win. I don't think anybody here is saying we're going to do it everywhere up and down California, but my goodness, this is a wonderful project. It's going to do jobs. It helps alleviate the pressure on the ocean, and it was supported by the locals, and I would support them and those environmental groups. Thank you for your time, Madam Speaker.
All discussion having ended, Mr. DeVore, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, again, I know that we've been at this for a long time. I have to express my deepest thanks to the members that participated in this debate on both sides of the question. And I took some notes, and I'm hoping to try to endeavor to answer some of the questions that were posed during the debate. And so for those of you who are still considering your vote, this is for you. To my distinguished colleague from the greater Sacramento area, he cited Section 3, 2246, paragraph B, 7. And what I would like to point out to members is in paragraph 8, the bill specifies that the lease shall provide without limitation that the Attorney General shall enforce the terms of the lease. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that there's going to be no secret side agreements because the Attorney General has the right under the terms of this proposed law to enforce the terms of the lease. Now, if I may, there were some very good points made from a colleague from both the Santa Barbara area as well as a colleague from the North Coast. And if I may, try to answer some of their specific concerns. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard about seepage, the natural seepage that has been occurring in the area around Santa Barbara for millennia, actually. The local Native American tribes actually use that oil and tar for some of their local purposes. Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at about 80,000 barrels of oil, roughly equal to the Santa Barbara Channel spill or the Exxon Valdez, that leaks out of the ground naturally every 2 or 3 years. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been 40 years since the horrific Santa Barbara Channel spill. But, ladies and gentlemen, for some of you who were teenagers or adults 40 years ago, you were likely wearing polyester bell-bottoms. And these little devices on our desks, laptops, they weren't even a dream yet. Ladies and gentlemen, the technology has gone way beyond what it existed 40 years ago, to the point where there is a minuscule amount of oil that leaks from the operations compared to the natural oil. In fact, around the world today, two-thirds, ladies and gentlemen, fully two-thirds of the oil in the water is due to natural seepage, and less than 1% comes from rigs around the world. Now, this company, as the result of the trust fund, will donate not less than 3,900 acres to be a preserve, to be set aside for ecological purposes. They're going to tear down 4 rigs. They're going to tear down the shoreside facilities that accept the oil. I heard about a concern that there'd be 40 new oil wells drilled from the one platform where there's currently one well. Ladies and gentlemen, there's not just one well there. All platforms have multiple wells that they drill from their one well to maximize their output. This current rig that is in federal waters is near Vandenberg. It is not in the more heavily populated parts of Santa Barbara. It's actually closer to a U.S. Air Force base. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, to the question of greenhouse gas emissions, and you may find this interesting, the fact that we're going to be producing more of our oil here in California means de facto we will be importing less from other nations. And it is more efficient from a greenhouse gas perspective to extract, refine, and use the oil locally rather than ship it from 10,000 miles away. We get to keep the dollars that would otherwise go overseas. We get to generate the jobs that would otherwise go overseas. And we get the tax money, in this case, the royalty revenue, a minimum of $1.8 billion in the next 14 years we can keep here instead of sending to nations overseas, many of whom don't like us. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that this agreement has parts that many of you are uncomfortable with. But look at who originated this idea. Look at some of the individuals within Santa Barbara who worked very carefully to craft a unique vision that actually results in the tearing down of offshore oil rigs in exchange for being able to get at more of California's oil. This sets a precedent, ladies and gentlemen, but a good precedent, a precedent that I think should be a model for offshore platforms around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your consideration in this debate at this late hour. I think it represents what's best about this chamber, and I would respectfully request an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeVore. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Who moved a call? Mr. DeVore? Mr. DeVore moves a call. Mr. Nava, for what purpose?
I rise to lift the call.
One moment, Mr. Nava. Mr. DeVore and moves, Mr. Nava seconds that the call be lifted. Clerk, please open the roll. This is all members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 28, noes 43. The measure fails. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby request unanimous consent to rescind and expunge the action on AB 23 by Mr. DeVore.
Without objection. Mr. Torrico.
Under motions and resolutions, earlier I had made a motion to withhold all vote changes and add-ons. Please rescind that motion.
You're withdrawing the motion, the earlier motion? Very well. Clerk will note. Members, it's been a long afternoon. I know many of you are heading for the airport. Just a moment, please, members. Members, I would ask that you please not leave the chamber. We have not concluded our session. Speaker Bass is at her desk. She would like to address the body before we adjourn.
I would. I would like to address the body for a couple of reasons. First of all, it has been such a long day. I don't even know how long we've been in session, and frankly, I didn't remember if it was morning, afternoon, or night. But you know, while we went through all the trauma of the last 24 or 48 hours in this chamber trying to close a record deficit, we lost an important member of our Assembly family in the last 24 hours. I was notified last night, I think it was around 10:30, that we lost Parrish Collins, a very young staffer who has worked in the Assembly for a number of years. I had known him for 5.5 years that I was here. He worked with Speaker Nunes first as his assistant as a sergeant, and then he developed an interest in policy, and so Speaker Nunes had him come into the building and work as a legislative aide. And after Speaker Nunes left, he continued on in my staff and worked in a very important capacity on several very important areas of legislation. And about 2 weeks ago, out of the blue, he became ill. Now, this is a young man, 30 years old, just had a 6-month-old child, and became ill out of the blue. And everybody on my staff and that new Parrish was shocked because there wasn't any indication of him being ill. And so we got emails every day hearing about his condition, and we were very happy over the last few days because he had gotten better, and everybody was relieved and felt that he took a turn for the better. And then last night at around 10:30, I received an email saying that he had passed away. And so I just thought about that in the midst of all of our trauma in trying to close this deficit and everything that we were going through with our differences and our, disagreements over policy and how we see things. It takes something like losing someone, especially at that age, just beginning his life, to really bring it home how important it is. What we do every day, the work we do here in this chamber, our relationships with each other, even when we're in the middle of differences. And I just wanted to bring everybody's attention and adjourn in the memory of Parrish Collins. Thank you. On that note, I also want to just thank everyone for all of the work that everyone in this chamber has done over the last many months. And I know you all feel like I do, which is fried. And everybody is looking forward to taking a little bit of time off. I think we have a couple of weeks before we come back. And I just wanted to thank a number of folks. First and foremost, I really want to thank the budget staff. And there's a whole number of folks there who work on the staff who are here almost 24 hours, 7 days a week. I remember at the end of last year, you guys being here on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's, New Year's Eve, and we come right back and had to deal with this deficit after May 19th, and you guys have worked nonstop. And I just want to thank you for your commitment on both the Republican and the Democratic side, all of your hours that you've put in. I look forward to delivering this budget revision to the governor and having him sign it, and perhaps maybe the staff can take some time off. I want to thank the budget conferees, Noreen Evans, Kevin De Leon, Bob Blumenfield, Roger Nilo, Jim Nilsson. Did I get that right? I hope I did. I want to thank the conferees for their work, and all of the members, the desk staff and floor staff who make sure that we know what we're doing and when we're supposed to do it, the sergeants, ledge counsel, the maintenance and custodial staff who've been receiving IOUs, and of all the people in the building are some of the lowest paid folks in the building, and I know that they have gone through great hardship over these last 24 days. And my partner, Sam Blakesley, for negotiating in good faith and working very hard to bring this to a close today. And we were worried there for a while, but we got through it, and we made our deal. And Senator Steinberg for his partnership. And then, you know, I hope that members take some time off in their districts with their families, and we come back at the end or in the middle of August to wrap up this year. Thank you very much for all of your work, everyone.
Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to take just a brief moment to express my profound gratitude to the Speaker, who's been an exceptionally trustworthy person during a time of very difficult negotiations when the stakes could not have been higher. I can think of no one that I've worked with in this setting who's, I think, been more candid and tough and relentless, but at the same time demonstrated incredible passion and heart for her constituencies. And the way she represented her members, I think, was exceptional, and it's been an honor to work with her. And I want to say I'm also very blessed to be working with all of you. This is an assembly, this is a body, this is a House of the Legislature, which I think has comported itself with great dignity and purpose, and has achieved wonderful things that many thought unlikely, and we've done it in a bipartisan and a professional manner. So best to all of you, enjoy your break, and thank you for the privilege of working with you.
Members, we have a few more orders of business. Mr. Krikorian.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to deem all Assembly bills engrossed and to immediately transmit them to the Governor.
Clerk will note.
Madam Speaker,
without objection.
Madam Speaker, there is a resolution at the desk to adjourn the 4th extraordinary session. I request unanimous consent to take up SCR 2 without reference to file today for the purpose of third reading. SCR 2 sets the adjournment of the 2009-2010 fourth extraordinary session sine die on July 24, 2009.
Without objection, clerk will read the resolution. And members, this is a roll call vote, so please don't leave your desks. We do need a roll call vote to adjourn the extraordinary session. Clerk will read.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 2 by Senator Steinberg relative to the final adjournment of the 2009-10 fourth extraordinary session of the Legislature.
Mr. Krikorian, anything further on that? We just open the roll. I'll ask for an aye vote. Clerk will open the roll. This is for adjournment, members, adjournment of the fourth extraordinary session. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 75, no 0. The motion carries. And members, before you leave, Ms. Huber has requested, we actually had 2 requests for adjourn in memory. Mr. Eng has agreed not to do one today. However, Ms. Huber would like to do an adjourn in memory. So I realize it's been a very long 24 hours, but if you would please direct your attention to Ms. Huber for her adjourn in memory.
Members, this will be quick, but
Had we actually been outside this Capitol room today, you may have noticed that the flag was flying at half-staff. And I think that we owe at least 30 seconds to adjourn in the memory of David Leichleiter, age 53, who was struck and killed yesterday at 2 o'clock on Highway 99 in Lodi. He had been a State of California Department of Transportation employee for 27 years, and he was killed while serving my constituency in Lodi, working on Highway 99. That is the reason why our flag is flying at half-staff, and I ask that you adjourn in his memory as an active member of the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 3. He's survived by his wife and 2 children, and I ask that you please take a moment to remember him and adjourn in his memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Huber. Is there any more business to come before this House? Seeing and hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Mr. Adams moves. Mr. Krikorian seconds that this House stand adjourned. And Democratic caucus in the members' lounge. Quorum call is lifted. Announce that. Members, our next session will be, we have recess from today until August 16th. Monday, August 17th, floor session at 12 noon. Democratic caucus upon adjournment immediately.
The mic's on. Are you ready? I thought it was going to be, well, we give it another. Adams, vote change, SB 13, aye to no.
Adams, SB 13, aye to no.
Delatorre, AB 19X4, aye to no.
Delatorre, AB 19X4, aye to no.
Salas, AB 15, not voting to aye. And AB 26, not voting to no. Oh. All right.
Huh.
Yes?
Hey, can you ask? I'm not sure.
Oh.
One of the things I care about. I figure eventually we'll have to try it again, given the way I think the budget will go.
Okay, so I'm done. What happens if stays? So you're okay.
DeVore, AB 21, 4X, aye to no.
DeVore, AB 21, 4X, aye to no.
Fong, AB 7X4, not voting to no.
How and when do I determine that? I know, but I mean, once, how do you actually see the
Skin.
But right now, can I, how soon can I find out whether or not my vote, my switch?
Skinner, AB 5X4, aye to no. Skinner, AB 9. Oh, I'm sorry.
Skinner, AB 5X4, aye to no.
Skinner, AB 9X4, aye to no.
Skinner, AB 9X4, aye to no.
Chesbro, AB 4X19, aye to no. AB 19. It's the fourth extraordinary session, right? Yeah.
Chesbro, AB 19, 4X, aye to no.
Thank you.
Duh. Okay. Let's get this right here. Where is it? Okay. Do I say AB Conway, AB 1X4, I to no? Yes. And then
Conway, AB1X4, I to no.
Conway, AB 26, I to no.
Conway, AB26X4, I to no.
Thank you.